Give you a signal.
Yep, you're good.
But the director of the Michigan High School Athletic Association would not let me run because we didn't have a full team, even though I didn't need a team in order to qualify, per se, because there was no regionals at that time, because not that many schools had cross country as a sport. So that was the first time that I encountered discrimination because I didn't see too well. At Michigan State University, I wanted to be an education major. I was told by the Department of Education that I could not be an elementary school major, that I'd have to be a secondary education program because I couldn't see too well. So I eventually worked my way up to talking to the Dean of the Department of Education at MSU. And I said, look, if you will let me get several teachers who are willing to sponsor me when it's time for student teaching, will you let me into the program? And he said, yes, if you can get 3 people in a school district that will sponsor you, I will do that. What we didn't know is I'd already received 4 or 5 letters from different principals in the Lansing School District, because my dad was a teacher and coach in the Lansing School District. And as such, these people knew me, and they all vouched for me. So I went in the next day and presented him with copies of the 5 letters. And being a very smart man, the dean looked at me and said, you had these letters yesterday, didn't you? And I said, yes, I did, but I wanted to make sure we were on the same page. So that's how I got into the elementary education program at MSU. Graduated, finished my master's degree while I was teaching in the Lansing School District, taught 6th grade for 3 years in Main Street School, which was a Title I school at that time because of the social economic background of the students. Thoroughly enjoyed it. About 4 of my kids ended up being very successful in college, played on a state basketball championship team at Lansing Everett. Of my 30 kids one year, 23 of them had the best test scores in the city out of the top 50. Parents loved me, kids loved me, but I'd always wanted to be a lawyer. So at that point I started applying to law schools. The only Michigan law school I applied to was the University of Michigan. At that time, the law school admittance test could not be administered to a person with a visual impairment because it was a time test. And the test would have to be read to me. And so they wouldn't give me a test score. So the University of Michigan, its great wisdom, put me on a waiting list. For a moment I thought about suing them for discrimination, but then I thought, no, if I do that, they'll let me in, and for all I know then they'll just flunk me out to get rid of me. So I applied to out-of-state schools, got accepted to most of the out-of-state schools that I applied to, and ended up at the University of South Carolina. Got a really good education for 3 years, and I still have many friends from South Carolina that I see every year, so we've had a 40-year friendship, and that kind of dates me a little bit. I am a senior citizen in terms of age. So that was my second encounter that I think is worthwhile in terms of overcoming, again, what was subtle discrimination by the University of Michigan Law School. I then worked for 4 years in the Ingham County Prosecutor's Office after passing the State Bar of Michigan. The prosecutor at the time was a fellow named Ray Scudeller, who, based on my academic record, my background, the fact that he knew my family in Lansing, he took a chance on me, and I became one of his assistant prosecutors. And to this day, he says I was one of the best ones he had. From there, I became an administrative law judge for the state of Michigan. I was appointed by Governor Milliken. I've worked for 5 governors. As such, I worked for the insurance commissioner to start. By the 1980s, I was one of the leading experts in insurance law in the state of Michigan, and was contacted by a law firm from Gaylord, Michigan, who were recruiting me to become one of their lawyers. So they paid my expenses to go up to Gaylord and be interviewed. My wife and I drove up there. I don't drive, so she drove me. The interview went well, but they kept looking at me during the interview because, as you can see from this film, my eyes squint a little bit and blink a lot because I don't have good control. Since birth, I've had an underdeveloped retina. I have scarring on my eye tissue. As such, about halfway through the interview, the one guy in the firm said, "You don't have your glasses with you?" I said, "No, glasses don't help. I don't wear glasses. I'm legally blind." At which point the 3 partners stood up and said, "Well, we want to thank you for coming, but we need somebody who can drive." At which point I said to them, where is most of your caseload? And they said, right here in Gaylord. I said, well, the courthouse is right across the street. I don't think I need to drive from your office, even in the wintertime, to walk across the street to the court. They didn't understand, so probably just as well that I didn't quit my job with the state and go working for them. So there are 3 examples of the type of hurdles that our clients at BSBP run into on a daily basis. And from 1979 to 2012, I worked as an administrative law judge for the state. About half that time, I was the chief judge. The other half of the time, a supervising judge. In 2012, I was offered the opportunity to head up a new state agency that Governor Snyder had created, and that's the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons. As such, the agency was created because the former agency, which was run by a commission, had lost its ability to be effective and efficient because of politics. And the governor wanted to eliminate that. So he abolished the Commission for the Blind. He created BSBP, which is our acronym, and I was appointed as the first director and have held that position now for 3 years. October 1st was the 3rd anniversary of my tenure here. We needed to make some cultural changes as well as some changes structurally. We've made a lot of the changes necessary to improve our service to the Michigan blind community. I would say we're about 70% of what our goals were when I took over this job. On a daily basis, I'm amazed at the majority of our staff, which is a very good staff. They are committed to helping the blind community. The blind community is served well by our agency in Michigan. Our goal every year is to help Michigan's blind community, those who are not independent, to become independent and to become employed. We are a vocational rehabilitation service organization that has that long-term goal of helping every blind person who comes to us for service to become fully employed based on their abilities and their background. This year alone, we have about 240 college students that we are helping through college who are blind or legally blind. We have some students in law schools. We have a couple students in medical schools. We have produced several doctors who were our former clients. We've produced about a dozen lawyers. I know the country needs more lawyers, right? We've produced a lot of social workers, a lot of teachers, a lot of business people. We've produced people who are auto mechanics. We've produced people who have gotten into business on their own and are running their own business. And I believe that this organization has fulfilled what Governor Snyder was hoping it would fulfill in helping Michigan's blind community reach independence and become employed.
All right, that's just awesome. What is the most challenging part of your job here in the office?
My job on a daily basis is not the mechanics of what we do day to day. It's not the minutia what staff does. In a job like this, once in a while you get the urge to micromanage, and I try not to do that. I have 4 division directors now who do a really good job. They get a lot of assignments delegated to them. But on a daily basis, I have to deal with the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, which is the department that our bureau is housed in. I have to deal with the Budget Office. I have to deal with the Financial Office. I have to deal with the Legislative Office. I have to deal with my supervisor, who's a deputy director of the department. There are reports that I have to oversee that have to be filed with the federal government. There are state reports that have to be filed on a quarterly or annual basis. There are monthly reports that I have to file with the department that are my responsibility. I have to deal with inquiries from the legislature. I have to deal with consumer complaints. To a certain extent, I oversee the Freedom of Information Act activities because being a lawyer, I keep my hand in that a little bit. So on a day-to-day basis, I could be wearing 12 different hats with 27 different assignments. Today, for example, I dealt with 3 or 4 different issues. I dealt with the service we were giving a client. I dealt with an issue that arose with our business enterprise program. I dealt with a budget issue. I dealt with a freedom of information issue. And now I'm dealing with this interview.
Well, what's the part of this job that you enjoy the most?
I had never been actively involved in any of the groups that represent the blind community. such as the American Council for the Blind or the National Federation for the Blind. I just kind of graduated from high school and graduated from college and went out and found my own jobs. Graduated from law school and again went out and found my own job. This agency did help me. I don't want to minimize what they did do for me. They helped me when I was at Michigan State. They helped me with tuition and with reader services. If I needed any equipment, they helped with that. But basically, most of my contact with the blind community was simply through friends that I'd made over the years who happened to be blind or legally blind. Not that I was an activist or anything else. However, once I got this job and started sitting behind this desk and be involved in some of the things that our employees and our clients are involved in, it was kind of like a rebirth. My youngest daughter said it was kind of like made me like the energized bunny again, that I was re-energized from my prior position as an administrative law judge. I found that the staff, the majority, overwhelming majority of the staff is dedicated. They're hardworking. They go beyond what is called for a normal state employee to help their clients. I've been active. It's become a job that has kind of touched my heart. And I will probably remain somewhat active once I retire because there are certainly political issues that need to be resolved as we move along in history.
Now, going off that last question, how has the program and or the department benefited your personal life?
I would say that it has rekindled a consumer advocacy spirit that I had at one time or another in my youth. I'm a product of the Vietnam War era, where we had demonstrations and sit-ins, and we were passionate about politics, and at that age I was also passionate. I remember participating in a sit-in at Michigan State in about 1969 or 1970, protesting against the Vietnam War, and President Nixon at that time had put all kinds of bombs in one of the harbors in Vietnam, and it was an act of war, and clearly I think that spirit of consumerism has rekindled my involvement. I'll probably be more active politically in some causes once I retire.
That's just amazing in itself. I appreciate you doing this interview. Do you have any last comments for the people and the students watching this video?
I would urge anybody watching this video to do a couple things. I would ask them, number one, if they have questions, to contact me. You'll have my contact information. Number two, when you meet a blind person, assume they're a person. Don't assume that they needed to be treated differently. And I'll tell you a story about one of my teachers from the blind school. He was a PhD in mathematics from Columbia University. Somehow ended up teaching at the Michigan School for the Blind, and I can't quite remember how he got here, because he was a guy from New York City that was raised and educated in New York, but he somehow ended up in Lansing, Michigan at the Michigan School for the Blind, and his name was Fred Newman. Dr. Newman taught me math for 4 years. And I remember him telling us the story one day. He was a great storyteller, besides being a great teacher. He and his wife went out to dinner one night, and the waitress came and handed each of them a menu. Now, he had no vision, but she handed in, he took them, and he was able to grasp the menu. And then the waitress says, "Oh, you don't see?" And he said, "No." So she turned to the wife and said, "What would he like for dinner?" Mrs. Newman's response was, "Why don't you ask him?" Blind people are no different than any of the people that will be watching this film. The only difference is they may not see things, but they may hear things, they may feel things. They certainly may be as smart as any of us who do see it all. And I think you need to understand that blindness is merely one of the hurdles that we all have to cross in life. We all have hurdles and issues, and that blindness should not be considered a disease.
Is it still recording?
I don't know.
Oh, I hope we didn't lose that last part.
I know.